I'm fine, sir.
Fine, brother. Welcome, Ehtasham Sahib. Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, I'm fine, brother. I'm fine. Welcome. Well, I formally welcome you all. Today, I propose a new engagement. New engagement in the sense of one particular dimension that has been occupying a very, very important place in the determination of refugee status. This is a dimension, this is a development that has been, or rather I should say, being utilized by the global north nation states whenever they are confronted with refugee exoduses and refugee influxes in their territories. This is a dimension which is exclusively based on the technological developments. Though the week 5 engagement is exclusively devoted to refugee status determination dynamics, procedures, the rights of refugees, the rise of restrictionism, and state obligations beyond 1951 UN Convention relating to the status of refugees and technological developments. In this particular engagement, I am going to deliberate with your help, with your support, with your highly intellectually oriented interventions and inputs in the area of artificial intelligence or application of artificial intelligence in refugee status determination. And again, with your unflinching support, we are going to deliberate the niceties and nuances of algorithmic humanitarianism, where we have to assess, we have to critically appreciate the rights of refugees, and for that we have to undertake and we have to revisit the idea of international human rights law framework requirements relating to asylum, the rise of restrictionism and the state obligations beyond the two important instruments which are known as the subject matter of international refugee law. We have to understand the entire gamut of RSD procedures, minimum standards, principles of confidentiality, burden of proof, and how to establish the idea and concept of credibility in RSD mechanism. We have to appreciate and we have to visit and understand the kinds of RSD procedures, normal procedures, specific procedure, accelerated procedures, and manifestly unfounded procedures. At the same time, my dear friends, we have to understand the idea of responsibility, particularly the idea of safe third country option, harmonization of 1951 Refugee Convention, definition, and other important RSD procedures. We have to understand rest of the classes as well as the clauses which have been encapsulated in the refugee definition stratification, particularly international crimes, serious non-political crimes, and the acts contrary to the purposes and principles of United Nations Charter. We have to understand the loss and denial of refugee status, refugee protection and measures against terrorism, withdrawal and cancellation, and revocation of refugee status. We have to understand the idea of those very situations where a refugee ceases to be a refugee. I am talking of the cessation clauses as per Article 1 of 1951 UN Convention on Refugees. Because cessation clauses takes into account the fundamental changes in the circumstances in the country of origin, internal protection and flight alternative, which I have also touched upon yesterday. And we have to take into account the idea of reception, detention procedures, and establishing the facts and special issues that would also be taken into consideration. But one particular dimension which I like to bring to your kind notice, my dear friends, which has not been deliberated as of now or ever since I have introduced this particular coursework, that is international refugee law. I haven't deliberated this particular dimension, And this is a dimension which for the first time we are going to deliberate in a full-fledged manner in this particular engagement. But before I proceed further in attending this particular dimension, that is a dimension of artificial intelligence, let me tell you, and I would also be sharing, there are two important instruments which we have to consult in understanding the entire ambit of refugee status determination. That is Handbook on Criteria and Procedure Determining the Status of Refugees, that has been designed and prepared by the UNHCR in 1979. Again, we have to understand another important instrument, that is International Law Commission prepared document which is known as the Draft Code of Offenses Against the Peace and Security of Mankind of 1954. These are the two important instruments. So far the procedural aspects are concerned. It does not mean that we are going to limit our deliberations, discussions and interactions to these two important documents. Rather, the entire interdisciplinary approach is going to be pervaded in our deliberations while appreciating the critical issues in the refugee status determination at the beginning of the third decade of the 21st century. And therefore it becomes very, very important what kind of scientific developments have been taking place. Or let me put all these dimensions in the form of questions. Suppose there are certain important questions which must under all circumstances be attended, and at the same time many questions out of these questions, I mean some of the questions out of these many questions would also be there in your examination paper. Very simple question, though the answer is not so simple. The very simple question, prima facie speaking, what is refugee status determination? It may arise. Then we would also be asking another important or attending another important question, that is, who is responsible for the burden of proving an asylum claim? What kind of a mechanism is generally resorted by the RSD officials? We have to determine the thresholds of confidentiality, credibility, corroboration and burden of proof. At the same time, we are also supposed to understand the procedural standards, access and aspects of refugee status determination. At the same time, we have to undertake the idea of artificial intelligence and how does artificial intelligence, my dear friends, impact RSD procedures, and to what extent artificial intelligence is capable to govern, to intervene and to regulate and to ensure the access to human rights. So we have to undertake all these different aspects of artificial intelligence, and to what extent the artificial intelligence has ultimately impacted the entire broadening of refugee protection. Some other important questions, particularly international human rights requirement regarding asylum procedures. We have to understand this particular dimension as well. What processes of refugee admission in countries of global north, we have to understand in the global north what we call situations, what kind of a mechanism they generally resort to, because at the European level there are certain important standards which have also been drafted by the Council of Europe and other important subsidiary organizations accountable to Council of Europe, a parent organization of these subsidiary organizations. Another important question that comes to my mind is, why is it important to focus on processes and procedures? What objectives can admission policies have? What are current trends in granting access to asylum seekers and refugees? And why does gender matter? Because if you take into account the refugee definition as per 1951 convention, gender is one such element that has not been properly dealt with. It is the most or majorly neglected aspect of the refugee protection that we have to understand in its entirety. And we have to create, my dear friends, a kind of a harmonization of 1951 convention definition with other important national, regional, and juristic and sociological, rather I should say anthropological understandings of refugee definition. So what are going to be the contours of this particular definition in addition to 1951 convention refugee definition? At the same time, we should not forget the minimum standards for normal procedures, specific procedures, special procedures, accelerated procedures, and unfounded procedures. Or is there any kind of a possibility to cajole, to rummage other important procedures which have not been attended so far by the collective wisdom of the refugee stakeholders or the refugee voices or the experts in the area of international refugee law or other important scholarships in the area of international human rights law framework? We have to understand the novelty of safe country of origin alternative. What should be the minimum standards of reception? That should also be taken into consideration. And what are the grounds of persecution? Or in other words, let me put it like this, is there any kind of a possibility to add additional arguments of persecution, or the grounds which have been provided under the definition, convention definition of refugees are sufficient? Or is there any kind of a possibility to rummage further what we call grounds of persecution? Suppose I can ask a question, what are the protected or protracted grounds? Though the protected grounds are already there, we have been understanding, we have been studying those very grounds. But how to understand the further important grounds so far the persecution is concerned? We have already understood that the word persecution has not been defined. And it is good. There are benefits not to have a definition, not to have any kind of a determination of the province of the term execution or persecution or other important what we call manifestations of discrimination. Then there is another important question, and that is, what is the distinction between a political and non-political offense? What may be political for a particular organization in a geopolitical entity, there is every possibility it may not be a political crime or political offense in the estimation of the governmental authorities or the state authorities. So that is another important dimensions that should also be attended. Because who is going to determine the politicality of an act? What are going to be the restrictions, limitations, confinements, as well as the laxities and flexibility for such kind of a determination? Another important, dimension is, do the victims of terrorist acts make a difference to the nature of the acts? What may be terrorism, it may not be terrorism in the estimation of country A. Though the country B is of the view that it's an terrorism that is being, perpetrated by one particular organization in that very country, and it is getting support from outside and from some other, nation states. So it may also be branded by some of the, countries in the neighborhood of any country. I am not specifying any kind of a, region, because in some of the geopolitical entities, liberation movements have been branded by their governments as terrorism. But when they are getting some kind of a, outside support or sympathy, that is branded as liberation movement. But in my personal capacity and personal understanding, my dear friends, I am totally against any kind of a violation of rights of the ordinary citizens and the violence committed against those very citizens. Therefore, we have to understand under what circumstances the refugee status determination should be resorted to, particularly of those people who are or have committed or have been found to have indulged in terrorist activities. That has to be, determined, and what has been the impact of invoking artificial intelligence in these kind of, situations. Now, can involuntary acts constitute assistance in persecution, and should they disqualify applicant or the asylum seekers from asylum protection? What is the appropriate standard in these kind of situation? We would also be appreciating these, dimensions. And the application of artificial intelligence in RSD procedures and impact of the algorithmic humanitarianism dimensions must also be assessed, because this is the technological advancement, and this is the, situation which is, in terms of, technological advancements, it has been, rather I should say, affecting the determination of refugee status. Now, another important dimension, another important question that comes to my mind is, friends, and this is a question which I have put to myself, and thereafter I was able to write a research paper on this particular, aspect. And that is, are artificial intelligence solutions discriminatory? That is the most important question. But the answer is not so simple. Because artificial intelligence is already there. And it is very, very important to understand the application of artificial intelligence in refugee status determination mechanism, and what kind of an impact we have been witnessing of algorithmic humanitarianism, as I call it. It is an humanitarianism, but it has been prefaced with an adjective which is known as algorithmic, taken from the, from a noun that is known as algorithms. So, what should be the understanding of artificial intelligence? It is very, very important. I would also be, sharing and submitting by tomorrow, because today I am going to receive the official copy of that very publication, and inshallah very positively by tomorrow I would be in a position to share not only my submission on artificial intelligence and in the context of RSD procedures, but there are some other important, scholarships on identical, dimensions, which I intend to share with all of you. My dear friends, when people hear the term artificial intelligence, the first thing they usually think is of robots. Because big budget films and novels weave screenplay about human-like machines that wreak havoc on Earth. And let me remind you at this stage, we are living in a knowledge society. And this knowledge society is also propelled, rejuvenated, galvanized with the reception of technological advancements in each and every sphere of human existence. And that is touching human existence in its entirety. So no human activity can escape the technological lenses. Same is the case with that of the artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is based on the principle that the human intelligence can be defined in a manner that a machine can easily mimic and execute tasks from the most simple to those that are even more complex. And its goals include learning, reasoning, critically appreciating perception. As ADM technology, ADM, the full form of the ADM is automated decision-making mechanism technology advances or advancements. Then in the wake of the previous or the old benchmarks that defined, artificial intelligence became redundant, archaic, obsolete, and outdated. For example, machines that calculate basic functions or recognize text through optimal character recognition are no longer considered to manifest or to epitomize artificial intelligence. Since this function is now taken for granted as an inherent computer-driven function, artificial intelligence, my dear friends, is continuously evolving to benefit many different industries, and the machines were wired using a cross-disciplinary approach based primarily on mathematics, computer science, linguistics, psychology, law, and justice, and even beyond. Here lies another important question, my dear friends. And the question is, what is the genesis of artificial intelligence? What are the roots of artificial intelligence? How does the idea of artificial intelligence came into existence? And this I have also deliberated in my research paper that I will submit for your critical scrutiny. Presently, I am also writing another important paper on artificial intelligence. And I would also share some of the important portions before its publication. And again, I am writing this artificial intelligence research paper in the context of international human rights law. When we take and try to understand the idea of artificial intelligence and how does it differ from other important applications, because now we are witnessing not only the artificial intelligence, but we are also witnessing the emergence of a new area of law, that is international software law. Which I would be, the contours of this paper I would be defining in the sense I would be, rummaging what exactly should be the subject matter of international software law. So far, the roots of artificial intelligence is concerned. In understanding the genesis of artificial intelligence, we have to go back in history. And that, history starts primarily, though it goes many, many years ago, but so far the modern concept of artificial intelligence is concerned, we should start it with the idea of what we call of artificial intelligence that has been provided by John McCarthy, an American computer scientist, developer, and inventor, who is today considered as the father or regarded as the father of artificial intelligence. John McCarthy has played a very, very important role, my dear friends, in the development, or rather in the groundbreaking role in defining the field of artificial intelligence that is exclusively dedicated to the development of intelligent machines. Then there is a question, are machines intelligent? Is there any possibility of machines becoming intelligent? John McCarthy, as a cognitive scientist, devised the term in his 1955 proposal at the first Dartmouth Conference of 1956 in United States of America. The objective was, in this particular conference, Dartmouth Conference of 1956, was primarily to explore manners, fashions, mechanisms, modes to make a machine that could reason like a human. And this kind of a machine must at the same time be capable of abstract thought. It must have the capacity to resolve any kind of a problem. And it was also contemplated in that very paper that was presented by John McCarthy. Is there any kind of a possibility for machines to improve themselves, which is known as the self-improvement application in the machines? Or is there any kind of a capacity to design these kinds of softwares and applications, what we have witnessed in a Hollywood movie like Terminator 3, The Rise of Machines? So that particular idea was conceived by John McCarthy in 1956 in his research paper in the Dartmouth Conference. We should try to gather information about artificial intelligence, not only artificial intelligence, but on every aspect of our intellectual engagement. Even we can also benefit from the knowledge of a rickshaw puller, if you put a simple question to him. We can also, get benefits or some kind of a dimension from different, walks of life. Artificial intelligence or study of law is not the exclusive field of the law students and law teachers. No. And therefore, I also put the same question to some of my friends who are not coming from the law background. One of them happens to be a student of medical sciences, a doctor. One of my friend is hailing from a background known as a civil engineering and presently working in Middle East. Another friend was hailing from the, agriculture. He has done his MSc in agriculture and presently he is, engaging in farming. And I have also put, recently I had a chance to have an interaction with all of them on artificial intelligence, including my son. Because he congratulated me when my son came to know that there is a publication on artificial intelligence. So I also asked him. Then he suggested me some of his, games, which he generally play on PS4. So he narrated some of the, games that you should also further, for the sake of further crystallization, you should also witness, you should also play these kinds of games exclusively designed on the basis of artificial intelligence. Then global north nation states have also been using artificial intelligence in refugee status determination at the borders. Border checks in the form of Eurodoc mechanism. I would also be, explaining what is Eurodoc. Another important, what we call, mechanism, that is the Frontex. Another important, what we call, situations which have been contemplated under the, Council of Europe directives and particularly under the Dublin arrangements. And what kind of a, fingerprints, data collection from the refugees, biometrics, and other important, facets we would also be dealing with. Now again, I am taking you back to the fundamental understanding of the artificial intelligence. The point is that we can benefit from each and every expertise in evaluating, because artificial intelligence has come to stay in our life as a very persuasive and pervading, all comprehensive umbrella that is going to cover each and every anthropological engagement. Because if I go back to the research paper presented by John McCarthy, then Mr. McCarthy has believed that every aspect of learning or any other feature of intelligence can in principle be so precisely, my dear friends, described that a machine can be made to simulate it. Because John McCarthy created in 1958, within inverted commas, a computer language which is known as Lisp, L-I-S-P, Lisp, a computer language, which became the standard artificial intelligence language. standard artificial intelligence programming, and today it is being utilized or used not only in robotics and other important scientific applications, but in a plethora of internet based services, from credit card fraud detection to airlines scheduling. Everywhere we find the use of artificial intelligence. And we, on daily basis, we generally do not pay adequate attention. But artificial intelligence has become the part of our daily life. We have been using ATM cards. We are taking various flights from one destination, from one particular airport to another important, destination airport. It has become the part of our, daily routine or daily life. In 2018, even the robotic surgery was also performed on my life partner. So you can very well understand whether it is the medical science, whether it is psychology, whether it is law, whether it is other important, applications, whether it is, making of, payments, applications like Paytm and other important, the Google Pay and other important, applications. Everywhere we find the use of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, my dear friends, has also paved the way for voice recognition technology, including Siri, another important language, SIRI, Siri, and that ultimately has become some kind of a personal assistant application. And we generally witness this kind of a language, and that is being used by the Apple in its iPhones. So that is another important aspect of artificial intelligence. But one of the most important questions that still remains to be answered, and that is a very simple question when we are talking of artificial intelligence. We have been deliberating artificial intelligence. But if I put it like this, what is artificial intelligence? Then, my dear friends, answer is a lengthy one. Though I would not be able to offer the complete what you call answer, the complete answer would be there, because we cannot use the word complete or completion or completeness in higher education. Everything in higher education remains incomplete, inconclusive. If there happens to be, or there is a possibility to have the finality of anything or finality of a particular research, then there would not be any kind of necessity of having institutions beyond 2021. There is no requirement of any kind of university or idea of higher education. So to the maximum level, to the maximum understanding of mine, I tried to attend this idea of artificial intelligence. What exactly are the contours, facets, manifestations, and other important, rudiments and rubrics of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence denotes to the simulation of human intelligence, and that too in machines which are programmed to think like humans and mimic human actions. That is the basic and the minimum core of understanding what is artificial intelligence. The term artificial intelligence may also be applied to any machine that demonstrated traits associated with the human mind, such as learning, reasoning, contemplating, thinking, problem solving. The ideal feature of artificial intelligence is the ability of artificial intelligence to rationalize and take actions that have the best chance of achieving specific goals, including refugee status determination or other important developments where we find the use of artificial intelligence. Or in other words, let me simplify it. Suppose this is a book which I am showing. Everybody understands, hailing from different strata of society. Everybody understands that prima facie, so far its visibility, it's what you call making, appearance, it appears like a book. And everybody understands this is a phone. But nobody understands, because each and every book is having a special kind of a subject matter. Books may be in the field of medical sciences, in the field of avionics, in the field of genomics, in the field of transparency law, in the field of international software law, in the field of psychology, history, political science, anthropology, biology, many other important. In each and every area, we are having a different kind of a content, a different kind of a literature. But what is important is it is a book. So similar is the case with that of artificial intelligence. Therefore, the companies, inventing companies, ADM industries, various sectors engaged in the development of specific applications, they are creating new inventions and new applications and new softwares which are generally programmed with the idea of artificial intelligence in each and every area. Therefore, artificial intelligence is also being developed with specific mandate or with exclusive application. In the field of law, in the field of refugee status determination, specific softwares have been developed, invented, and programmed. And these applications are being used by the border checks or law enforcement agencies, or in the world of crimes, in the world of or in the field of forensic sciences. Artificial intelligence is employed in the determination of what we call of the contours of the deoxyribonucleic acid, which is popularly known as DNA. Therefore, artificial intelligence have been programmed to rationalize the decisions. That kind of a capability, that kind of ability has also been contemplated by the inventors or by the makers of these kinds of technology. Then another important understanding of artificial intelligence is relating to artificial intelligence applications. The applications for the artificial intelligence technology are endless, countless, and it can be applied to many different sectors and industries, as I have just mentioned. Because artificial intelligence is being tested and used in the healthcare industry, or medical sciences, or even in the making and what kind of a prescription should be there in the hands of medical personnel, how to determine the doses, how to administer medicines to the patients, what kind of a surgical procedures should be resorted to, as I have a moment ago mentioned, the robotic surgery that is gaining ground in medical sciences because of the artificial intelligence. Other examples of machines with artificial intelligence, my dear friends, include computers that play chess and self-driving cars. Now we are contemplating with the idea of driverless trains, metro trains, or the tubes in London. Even in our country, in Delhi, driverless metro trains have also been contemplated, and to a very limited extent have also been operationalized or likely to be operationalized. That is the application of artificial intelligence, and each of these machines must weigh the consequences of any actions they take, as each action will impact the end result. That is the most important dimensions and most important what we call question. Suppose in chess the end result is winning the game, but in case of self-driving cars, the computer system must account for all external data and compute it to the act in a way that prevents a collision. Suppose take the example of some kind of a machines, manual machines. One person is also there who is what we call churning it. Another fellow is also doing some incidental work with the help of that very machine. In case of any kind of an accident or any kind of a and that fellow who is working and performing some kind of a task with the help of a machine which is a manual and by hand hand driven machine, if somebody screams, then the fellow who is operating it immediately stops. But in case of artificial intelligence or the machines which have been driven by artificial intelligence, the question arises, will artificial intelligence driven machine stop in case of any kind of a scream? Because artificial intelligence is emotionless. Artificial intelligence does not provide any kind of a emotional strength or emotional foundation. Artificial intelligence is not capable enough to understand the idea of pain, sufferings, miseries. These are some of the vital questions. Artificial intelligence or the applications could be programmed with the racial contours, the facial contortions, exclusively based on racial determinations. Complexions may also be programmed, but the pain does not have any kind of a racial distinction. Whether the pain or the pain that has been felt by a European, by an Indian, by a Latin American, by a US citizen, by a Canadian are same. Because the idea of pain does not recognize any kind of a geopolitical demarcation. We cannot determine the threshold of pain on the basis of our geopolitical identification. And that is why it becomes very, very important. It is a kind of a challenge for artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence also has applications in many other important sectors, like financial industry, where it is utilized to detect and flag activity in banking and finance. such as unusual debit card usage and large bank account, frauds, or large bank account, deposits. Artificial intelligence applications or AI applications are also being used to help streamline and make trading easier by making supply, demand, and pricing of securities easier to estimate. My dear friends, algorithms often play a very important part in the structure of artificial intelligence, where simple algorithms are used in a simple application while more complex ones help frame strong artificial intelligence operating systems. Artificial intelligence is being used across different what we call, milieu. But there is a categorization of artificial intelligence. And we have to what we call, categorize between the weak artificial intelligence and strong what we call artificial intelligence. When we are, talking of the weak artificial intelligence embodies a system designed to carry or execute a particular job. Weak artificial intelligence or weak AI systems include video games such as the chess example I have submitted before for your understanding. Personal assistants such as Amazon's Alexa. You also witness this kind of a advertisement on television. Alexa is generally ordered to play a particular kind of music, a particular kind of dialogue. It may also have some kind of a capacity of conversation with the owners of the house, because Amazon's Alexa, that also uses Apple's language, which I have shared a moment ago, and that Apple's what we call language is used, that is also used in iPhones, and that is known as Siri, SIRI. And if we ask this assistant Alexa a particular question, it answers, because it has been programmed with these kinds of applications, but it got some kind of a limitation, and that is why it is known as the weak kind of artificial intelligence. Now there is another important application which is known as the strong artificial intelligence. Strong artificial intelligence systems are machinations or machines or mechanisms that carry on the task considered to be human-like. These mechanisms of artificial intelligence or strong artificial intelligence, my dear friends, tend to be more complex and complicated systems. And strong artificial intelligence mechanisms, systems are programmed to address situations in which they may be required for the solution of problems without having a person's intervention. These kinds of systems can be found in applications like immigration screening. Here lies our engagement. Immigration screening, RSD mechanisms, self-driving cars, medical sciences, robotic surgeries, drones kind of unmanned aircrafts, missile technologies. These kinds of applications are generally based on strong artificial intelligence systems, applications, and programs, including what we call, softwares, and that has also been what we call, used in manning crossing of refugees at international borders. Then, at this stage, how should we understand? Because I have, and I'm not satisfied with this kind of an orientation which I have presented before you. Artificial intelligence should not be considered as a panacea. Artificial intelligence should not be considered as a utopian development in the later half of the 20th century, which is encapsulating entire posterity, or likely to encapsulate generation next. Artificial intelligence is a field of dreams for children. But when we are talking of, in case of weak artificial intelligence systems, but when we talk of the strong artificial intelligence systems, then we come across and we accost a lot of challenges. Because this is my understanding that artificial intelligence, whatever may be the threshold of its development, refinement, sophistication, and precision, it cannot compete or match with human intelligence. It cannot browbeat human terrain, human proclivity. It cannot be the unlimited enterprise because it has also been developed by the human mind. So when we critique artificial intelligence, then we find some kind of a space for cutting edge research. Since its beginning, artificial intelligence has come under scrutiny from scientists, legal humanities, social scientists, medical science experts, experts of avionics, and inventors of genomics, and the ordinary public. My dear friends, there is one common theme. A common theme of understanding that machines will become so highly developed that humans will not be able to keep up. And they will take off on their own, redesigning themselves at an exponential rate. And this is something we have witnessed. I can share a very, very important example because man is a social animal. And now we are, it is altogether a different story. On some other occasion, I would be taking up the amount of animality is increasing in human beings, which is popularly known as savagery. So some other occasions we would be, appreciating on the critical footing this particular dimension. But the point which I am deriving home is that in India, when Mr. late Rajiv Gandhi became Prime Minister, he offered a dream of 21st century to the electorate, to the general masses in India. He also offered another important enterprising initiative that was presented as a dream project, and that was computerization of all kinds of works in India. That these innovative and enterprising initiatives were contested by the then opposition parties, and they created a situation that if these kinds of forward looking scientific initiatives were implemented, then there would be unemployment in the country. So you understand today what has been the outcome of those initiatives. What has been the rate of unemployment? Whether the computerization is responsible for unemployment, or the interventions or applications of machines, or other important activities relating to industrialization are responsible or is responsible for the unemployment in India or in other jurisdictions of South Asia. So this is how the political parties have played their political planks at the hustings. And they created some kind of a havoc of these machines. But there are some dimensions as a critique of artificial intelligence. I believe that it is a real issue. Artificial machines or artificial intelligence machines or systems or softwares or applications can hack into people's privacy and even be weaponized. And other arguments debate law and ethics of artificial intelligence and whether intelligent systems such as robots should be treated with the same rights as humans. Because tomorrow there is a possibility a new area may also emerge. The rights of artificial intelligence machines. People may talk. Scholars may also write. The rights of robots or robotic rights. So in such a scenario, the ethical content is missing when we find the application of artificial intelligence to immigration, to refugee status determination, to medical science, to finance industry, to other kinds of industries, other kinds of what we call sectors, private sectors, public sectors, airlining, and other kinds of railway schedules, all kinds of, particularly the transportation industry, I should call, or the tourism industry, that is another important industry. So in such a situation, because the intervention of the artificial intelligence has eroded to a very great extent the right to privacy. Because nowadays what we have been witnessing, we are witnessing and we are willing in a surveillance state. And it has been made possible because of the arrival of the artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence has created a situation where the rights of citizens got shrunk. Artificial intelligence has entered into in our bedrooms. So in such kind of a scenario, what kind of a restrictions, if at all there is a possibility to have restrictions, what kind of a restrictions should be there? Because even in educational institutions, I can give you an example from my previous educational institution, that is Aligarh Muslim University. When the university administration made a proposals to install cameras on vital points and strategically important points, just to curb the menace of molestation, crimes, within the periphery of the university's campus, then the student community resented and they opposed tooth and nail the installation of cameras. Ultimately, there has been some orientation, sensitization, and the students were, this issue was, discussed with the students, and ultimately they relented. And the cameras were installed. So you can very well understand, and we must ponder over what exactly or could be the restrictions and limitations of artificial intelligence application. People generally give and are, governments and the municipal corporations are coming with the idea of what you call and how to deal with the problems of congestion in big cities like metropolitan cities or the cosmopolitan cities at a global level. So they offered the self-driving cars. After 100 years or 50 years, the public transport system is going to change. Immigration decisions would be different. There is every possibility even the robots would be manning the geopolitical demarcations and international boundaries at the borders, international borders. And they would be vetting and examining the credentials of the people who are intent to cross international borders and fleeing persecution, and they would also be intercepting them and going to determine their refugee status. For example, self-driving cars. Self-driving cars have been fairly controversial, my dear friends, as their machines tend to be designed for the lowest what you call possible risk and the least casualties. If presented with a scenario of colliding with one person or another, at the same time, these cars would calculate the option that would cause the least amount of damage. Another what you call contentious issue many people have with artificial intelligence is how it may affect human employment. That is another important emerging trend. And it has been opposed. Some kind of artificial havoc was presented by the detractors and the disgruntled elements in any kind of society. I have given you an example of Mr. Rajiv Gandhi and the political party's behavior during his regime. With many industries, on the other hand, my dear friends, looking to automate certain important jobs, including RSD justice and border control system, through the use of intelligence or intelligent machinery, there is a concern that people would be pushed out of the workforce. However, artificial intelligence technology may remove the need for human controlled borders programs, while ADM, that is the automated decision making or decision making machines, manufacturers may easily replace humans with artificial intelligence driven machines, making people's skills more obsolete. As a critique, we are supposed to what we call ponder over these important challenges. But I am of the view, my dear friends, if artificial intelligence is likely to be employed, then I am of the view, and as a student of international law or international refugee law in particular, I do not see any kind of a harm, provided artificial intelligence machines, applications, softwares must also be operated by the human mind. Operation may not be an appropriate term in this context. A better word should also be find out, and I find it as monitoring. Artificial intelligence systems at borders, in hospitals, at airports, in scientific labs, in forensic sciences, and other important industries and sectors. There should be a monitoring mechanism, and that should be meant by the human beings. Because everything cannot be left to artificial intelligence. And that is why a new area is emerging, artificial intelligence law and ethics. Because when we are talking of human emotions, when we are appreciating the idea of human relationships, when we are contemplating the idea of pains, sufferings and miseries, then the human engagement becomes primacy, and this primacy cannot be underestimated, and therefore it is going to be the responsibility of the innovators, inventors, improvers and approvers, that they should contemplate additional what we call developing or additional what we call development of applications, where the sentiments and the human emotions, the idea of facial contortions, and the facial contortions must also be the part of what we call of artificial intelligence, as we have designed on WhatsApp different kind of emojis. Instead of writing a sentence, we exchange various what we call emojis or images or photographs. Now a new kind of a trend is there. We generally do not write sentences when we are going to exchange pleasantries on WhatsApp on different occasions, on festivals, on birthdays. We generally send pre-designed cards. And a card says on suppose on the occasion of Holi, that is coming, we are going to exchange a lot of what we call pre-designed cards, and one particular cards that is forwarded 100 times from one phone to another group of individuals. We keep on forwarding, so the sentences are absent. Our personal photographs are absent. We find very less what we call photographers shops or studios in the market today, because every individual who is having a smartphone is also a photographer. He is also an expert in the artificial intelligence. He is carrying each and everything. Entire, gadgets and tools he is carrying with himself or herself. So you can very well understand what kind of a society with the arrival of artificial intelligence we are making. So we have to ponder over. It is not the governmental responsibility, my dear friends, because we have to understand the cultural moorings, the cultural affinity, emotions, human contortions, other important what we call experiences of human mind. Each and everything should be understood, because artificial intelligence is not the panacea. This is my understanding. Now we have to understand what exactly is going to be the impact of artificial intelligence on the RSD procedures. And before I proceed further in evaluating the idea of algorithmic humanitarianism and what exactly are the contours of this kind of a humanitarianism, we have to understand the idea of refugee status determination, and thereafter we would also be resorting with the idea of algorithmic humanitarianism. And before that, let me ask you this particular question: what exactly is the understanding? I mean, what exactly is the understanding of refugee status determination? This is my well considered view, and this is not something novel. Just to refresh your memory, I am making this particular submission. A person is a refugee, my dear friends, the moment he or she meets the criteria of 1951 Refugee Convention or other relevant national, regional, international instrument. He becomes immediately a refugee. Both states and office of the UNHCR have an obligation, my dear friends, to provide international protection to refugees. In the asylum, deliberation, we have also deliberated this particular, line of argument. The documents confirming protected and civil status also have an important protection dimension. A person's refugee status exists independently of formal recognition. Governments have procedures to distinguish between refugees whom governments have an obligation to protect and other persons who do not need any kind of an international protection, international recognition as refugees. But we should understand that under all circumstances, there is a need, there is a requirement to invoke fair protection processes. And fair protection processes are those which receive, register, and determine refugee claims in a timely manner and in accordance with international, regional, and national standards of RSD determination mechanisms. Because when we are talking of refugee status determination mechanisms, then refugee status determination mechanisms have been provided in two instruments at the beginning. I have cited those very instruments. The instrument that has been prepared by the UNHCR in 1979 as a handbook, and another instrument that has been prepared as the draft codes of conduct where the ethical content is also there of 1954, how to treat and what kind of a fair treatment should be meted out to refugees. And that is a document that has been prepared in 1954 by the International Law Commission. We have to understand, as I have submitted yesterday, my dear friends, that there has to be a policy of human rights first, within inverted commas. Human rights first policy should be the guiding principle to extend, recognize, receive, register people as refugees or extend refugee status to those who have been seeking at the borders. I have also mentioned yesterday that we should not violate Article 31 of 1951 UN Convention relating to the status of refugees with its additional protocol of 1967. Because it cannot be expected from refugees, from asylum seekers, that they should produce their identity credentials at the border when they have fled persecution in their country of origin. Because a person who is fleeing persecution does not have the presence of mind or ability or alacrity to collect his travel documents, visa documents, or apply for visa. That is why the immediate concern of such people is the safety of their lives. And when there is a question of safety of life, then the life becomes important, and that attains a zenethical importance and ecclesiastical importance. And all the incidental, relative, associated, and collateral items becomes subservient to this particular importance, and that is the right to life. So under all circumstances, it should be the responsibility of the RSD officials, governmental machinery, that they should not violate Article 31 of the Refugee Convention of 1951. It should be the responsibility, with a human face or human rights framework driven responsibility of such officials to extend all kinds of what you call help to such fleeing people, fleeing from persecution or fleeing persecution. Refugee status determination procedure, whereby the authorities of the host country or the UNHCR establish that an individual who seeks international protection is actually a refugee. That is, he or she meets the eligibility criteria. Eligibility criteria under international or regional refugee instruments, national legislations, or in the absence of a national legislation, there is a possibility to have the UNHCR mandate, which is generally referred, this kind of cumulatively, this kind of a mechanism is referred to as a refugee status determination mechanism. So here lies another important question. What is refugee status determination? Or you will call it what is RSD in the abbreviated form? The words refugee status determination are forbidding and legalistic, my dear friends. But the process they generally refer to pertains to human beings, usually in circumstances of greater distress. Let me put it more simply. refugee status determination correspond to the question, is Mr. A or Mr. B a refugee? If we are asking this kind of a question, then definitely we are going to determine the province of operation. Operation means the entirety of mechanism how to determine refugee status. An answer to this particular or these kinds of questions, my dear friend, is that the question or the status of an individual should immediately be determined, because the individual is stands identified, who is seeking or knocking the doors of the neighboring country, or by crossing an international border, or during transit reaches to another important or other country beyond the neighborhood. If recognized in these kinds of circumstances, if recognized as a refugee, a special legal regime applies to such kind of individuals or group of individuals, and they will be entitled to a number of important rights and benefits, as well as humanitarian assistance and protection measures, which taken together constitute what is known as international refugee protection, within inverted commas, international refugee protection. Refugees also got certain obligations towards the host state. And most prominent obligation on the part of refugees that has been identified by a katana of scholarships in the area of international refugee law, and that is that the refugees must honor the laws of the refugee hosting country. They should not violate the laws of the refugee hosting countries. Such controversies in the recent past, in the recent what we call months and years, what we have been witnessing in many of the European nation states, particularly France, Germany, Austria, Belgium, Holland, and some other Scandinavian countries, where the people of Syrian origin, Afghan origin, Jordanian origin, Lebanese origin, they contested the idea of integration, idea of assimilation, idea of distinct identity. And the France has been at the forefront in contesting these kinds of situations, because in many situations refugees have, the Syrian refugees have forgotten their past, and some of the radical elements contested and vouched for their distinct identity in the new what we call environments of reception, particularly in France and Germany. Instead of honoring the laws, regulations, customs of the host country, they carried their own distinct identity and demanded a separate kind of a treatment. Though some of the European nation states have come out with the across the border treatment, but some countries were, some refugees or some refugee groups were reluctant to honor this kind of a reception, and that has created a lot of problems in the host countries. And that is why in such, situations, there has been lot of, conflicts, crimes, and violence among the, various sections of the, population in the refugee hosting countries. Because refugees were reluctant, though they happen to be in minority. I'm not talking of all the refugees, but some radical elements. And therefore, refugee status or determination mechanism has become difficult to operate. However, refugee status determination means an examination by a government authority or the UNHCR of whether an individual who has been submitted an application, an asylum application, a refugee status, what we call, entitlement application, or otherwise expressed his or need for international protection, is indeed a refugee. That is, whether his or her situation meets the criteria is specified in the applicable refugee definition. A person does not, my dear friends, become immediately a refugee or by virtue of a recognition decision by the host country or the UNHCR. But a refugee is recognized because he or she is a refugee after meeting the criteria that has been designed in the handbook prepared by the UNHCR and the draft codes of ethics meant for the refugee status and determination prepared by the International Law Commission in 1954. In other words, we can put it like this: the recognition decision is declaratory. It acknowledges and formally confirms that the individual concerned is a refugee. So that is the situation. And beyond thinking, this kind of an arrangement is not at all possible. And therefore, a refugee who has been what we call recognized, as we have studied in the definition of a refugee, convention definition I am talking of, and other important regional what we call definitions that should also what we call meet the requirement, because both the definitions, I mean the definition that has been very comprehensive definitions are there at the regional level, like the definition in the Africa what we call African Convention, the definition in the Cartagena Declaration of 1984 that is exclusively meant for Latin American nation states, the definition that has been provided under the Refugee Act of 1980 in United States of America, and the protections which have also been contemplated in a very archaic piece of legislation passed by the US Congress as an Immigration Act of 1924, and how it has been subsequently amended. So some protections have also been contemplated while taking into considerations cumulatively all these protections, including the European Convention on Human Rights and what kind of protections have been, and the case law that has been generated as well as developed. I mean the jurisprudence on human rights, particularly the refugee rights, developed by the European Court of Human Rights, that should also be taken into consideration. So all such kind of, and we have already deliberated in case of definition, in case of asylum what we call understanding, what kind of a tests have been developed by jurisdictions like Canadian jurisdiction, Australian jurisdiction, and US jurisdiction, and how many countries subsequently honored these what we call tests to determine, I mean to appreciate or defining a person or extended international protection as per the convention definition. So we have to understand who is a refugee, who is not a refugee, who is included in the refugeehood, who is excluded from the refugeehood, who is going to be ceases or who ceases to be a refugee. All these notions and these contentions I would also be coming on the next occasions. So thank you very much. You can put questions. You're most welcome. If you have anything, and if you are willing to have or offer your inputs on these lines, so I would definitely be honoring your contentions, your interventions, your inputs. Thank you. Anyway, thanks a lot. So see you. Meanwhile, I will also share some of the important writings on these aspects. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. You're welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot. I'm immensely
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you.